Welcome to Podcasting for Financial Professionals. I'm Virginia Elder, your host and owner of Podcast Abundance, where we excellently produce audio and video podcasts for financial service professionals like you. Today, you get to meet Chris Miles, host of the Money Ripples podcast, where he teaches high-income earners how to unlock financial freedom faster, how to rely less or not at all on their 401k, and how to actually use life insurance the right way. If any of what I just said makes you roll your eyes and be like, great, I'm one of those guys, hang on. I think that even if your investing philosophies or your views about the right quote unquote type of insurance people should have, I think Chris's experience, stories, and marketing knowledge is worth staying for. He was a financial advisor, and you're going to hear his personal journey, why he quit, the mistakes he made with his own insurance policies, his business startups, a bit about his journey as he was starting his family, different debt situations and real estate deals, and just all kinds of really educational storytelling, which is what he's good at, in this episode. So there's a lot to learn there, plus learning through his experience, plus the fact that he is a complete OG podcaster and he's been podcasting for about 11 years. This is his second podcast, Money Ripples. He talks a little bit about his prior one, mistakes he made with that, and kind of how things have shifted, and how now 80 to 90% of his clients come from his podcast. I mean, dream come true, right? So on top of all that, and I didn't expect this, but he even shares about how he and his team are using AI in his business, even though he was completely anti-AI about just 6 months ago. Chris, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm excited to be here, Virginia. I can already tell it's going to be a fun conversation today.
Let's just dive straight in and talk about Money Ripples. You have this really interesting strategy that you share and teach through your courses and your content, of course. It's like infinite banking layered with some more advanced strategies around real estate. You used to be kind of the straight-laced financial advisor, selling all the products, all the different types of insurances. And that was kind of your journey, was discovering like, okay, how do they do it? Looking at really wealthy people. That advice though about that whole life is like the worst thing and you should get term life and invest the difference and like that advice is still very popular out there. And even in my shoes, I shared with you that I know a little about the whole life style of investing and how you can, basically take a loan out of the policy while your value is still in there growing, which sounds really interesting, but also complicated and confusing and a little bit scary. So, how do your listeners or your coaching clients or your course takers, how do they navigate that bad advice, potential fear? And again, we've got to be able to trust whoever we are investing with. So that's a big challenge for any financial professional out there. So could you just dive into that a little bit for me?
Yeah, absolutely. To kind of understand where that came from is my backstory is I was a financial advisor for 4 years, securities license, life insurance and health insurance license, mortgage licensed. I was the one-stop shop in a sense, right? Um, but after 4 years, I sat down with my dad, who is the penny pinching saver. He was like the guy that Dave Ramsey probably learned from, honestly. Like it's like my dad's 15 plus years older than Dave Ramsey. And like he was doing everything that Dave Ramsey would teach you, right? Like set and forget it, stuffed the money in his company 401k, get the match, paid off all of his debt, including his house in 18 years. He was so proud of it. And when he asked me to sit down with him after I'd been in the business for 4 years, I looked at all his numbers and he says, Chris, I'm 61 years old. I'm sick and tired of this. I got to quit. Yeah, because I just can't do this anymore. He's like, I've already had heart attacks and strokes from all the stress from my job and life and everything else. I got to get out. And so I was hoping I would have the answer. In fact, he was actually one of the reasons I actually got into financial advising, because I wasn't even planning to go become a financial advisor. I was going to become a business consultant. I was going to be like the Bobs from Office Space. If you ever watched that movie, what exactly do you do here? That was what I was
Yeah.
going to do. But I wanted to have real life business experience. And the first business that seemed kind of intriguing, because I thought not only would I learn about business, but I learned about investing, was becoming a financial advisor, which is why I got hired by a financial firm to do so. Um, but I looked at my dad's finances. I said, oh my gosh, dad, like, here's the deal. Even though you're debt free and you've been stuffing money in your 401k for decades, if you were to try to retire today, you better hope you die in about 5 or 6 years, because that's when you're going to run out of money. And he's like, well, what do I do? I'm like, I don't know. You did everything right from what I teach as a financial advisor. You just have to keep saving longer. You just got to keep doing it. Hopefully the market doesn't go down, which by the way, this is the end of 2005. The market did go down a few years later. So I was like, save more, may have to work in your 70s, which is exactly what he did, because he did just the mainstream path, the same one that the Susie Ormans and Dave Ramsey's will always recommend, right? And I know a lot of you guys, financial advisors, realize you roll your eyes and hear those people's names because they're just media. They're really like empty calories when it comes to advice for financial advice, right? It's like eating Doritos. You never get full, but man, it just puts on a lot of crap in your body. So, anyways, eventually that's what got me out of financial advising. I realized I'm like, wait, not only has it not worked for my dad, but I can't find evidence of clients, anybody else's clients after decades becoming really like financially free. Not like they couldn't retire, but they're retiring thinking they got to live on a little strict budget, right? Unless they made millions and millions from selling a business, which means they didn't make money in the stock market. But I'm teaching people set and forget it forever. So I started looking for other answers. I started looking for other things. And by the way, I also realized too, none of the financial advisors in our office were financially free, and they've been working there since the 1970s. So why would I expect to become free? So as I was trying to take the matrix red pill and look for other things, I think that's where it got me into real estate investing, because I found guys that were in their 20s and 30s. They were financially free. They were doing well. And I said, well, I want to learn more. And I had to shift into this whole new perspective of, instead of accumulating money, how do we accelerate money, especially in creating more income, specifically, not just active income, but even passive income from those investments that they have. And actually, by applying those same things later that next year in 2006, I was able to retire when I was almost 29 years old from the passive income I was earning from these things. And so, of course, you do that, everyone wants to know what you did. Now, during that same period of time, I'm talking to these real estate investors, they're all raving about the whole life policies, right? I'm like, why would you do that? They're like, yeah, infinite banking. Read this book by Nelson Nash. And I know some of you guys have probably heard of that too. And so I read the book. I said, okay, it looks cool. How do I set it up? Now, even though I had an insurance license, I didn't know how to design a whole life policy because I had told people never to get them, So I went to one of those guys' trusted referral sources. He became a friend of mine, and he set up my whole life policy. Now, when I looked at it, I said, dang, this is really expensive. Like these first 2 years I'm paying into it, I have none of this cash value, this tax-free savings account. I don't have anything in here. It's all going to costs, the insurance costs. He's like, well, that's normal for whole life. Whole life, unlike universal life, which gets more expensive over time, whole life is front loaded, then gets cheaper over time. I said, all right, well, if you say that's what has to happen, I'll do it. That was 2006. We all know what happened in 2008, right? The economy shifted. I had actually cut off a lot of my income streams to go start a new business with some partners, teach people how to basically get out of the rat race, as Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad would say, right? Well, guess what? I'm back in the rat race. I'm in the hole now between business and personal, everything that's going on. We're sinking. I'm in the hole like $16,000 a month. I'm going from like millionaire to upside down millionaire, where I'm over $1 million in debt. And I couldn't afford to pay those premiums, because those premiums that I asked the insurance company, I'm like, can I stop paying premiums? And they're like, no, you have to keep paying into this or you'll lose it. So I lost that. I put 25 grand total. I was paying $1,000 a month. I was just doing a simple 12 grand a year policy, and I lost it after paying in 25 grand. I figured that's just what had happened. But then I decided to do my own research, right? because I still have my insurance license. I said, you know what? I wonder if I could do these plans better than what this guy did for me. So I started to research it, found out he lied to me. Because I even asked him, I was like, aren't there things we can do to make this better, to return better? He's like, no, you can't. He was wrong or he lied. So I confronted him about it. 2 hour yelling debate I was having. I even brought in my numbers. He was showing his numbers. We're all doing our apples to apples comparisons. I even matched his big old fat death benefit as well because his philosophy was you just get as huge death benefit as possible and that kind of thing. And I finally just showed him, I was like, listen, even if I match your death benefit, my people would still have money in their policy. I would have still had money and I wouldn't have to lose it during the recession. I was like, and finally, when it got to that point, he says, Chris, I did it that way because I couldn't afford to cut my commissions. Like, bingo. Now you're being honest. And by the way, I'm not sending any of my friends and family to you anymore because I was referring him a ton of business. And so I started like on that journey, like trying to see like how can we design this to make it better, like cash rich and actually even flexible like universal life, but more guaranteed and potentially even higher returns based on how it's designed. Over the years, that's why I started to do it. Again, I try to find people that kind of believe that philosophy. But here's what I found every time is that every time I would go to an insurance agent to do it for my clients, they would come back and I'd say, wait a minute, they could do better than that. Like I can run my own numbers and do better than that. Why is the expert I'm referring to not being the expert? Why am I becoming the expert even though I'm trying to make them the referred expert? And that's what pissed me off because even though they knew they could do that, again, they would start pulling different levers so that they get paid a little bit more commissions versus giving the client the very best deal every single time. And that's why we brought it in-house in 2017. I was like, listen, I'm going to do it myself. At first I did it myself. All of a sudden it got bigger, especially as I was on podcasts and a lot of real estate investors started referring people to me. I finally just said, all right, I got to get a team to do this. But when I bring on agents on my team, I was like, listen, if you do this, if I find out that you don't do the best job for that client, you're out, you're fired. Like this is your verbal warning. You get one warning and that's it. And luckily I have a good team that doesn't do that. But that's the hard part. Even when I try to find somebody who actually talks about this infinite banking concept and stuff, and there's a lot of myths about that too that aren't like half truths really. Every time it's like one agent does a good job, but the other agent with that company doesn't do a good job, or they just aren't consistent. And so that's kind of why I did what I did. I'll tell you, here's my secret though. Because you'd think because I cut back our commissions like 80%, I mean, we make like 20% of what we would normally make on a typical whole life policy. But because it's in the client's best interest, they do a bigger policy. So to give you an example, I had one client where he was putting in like a little over 6,000 a year. And by the way, this client was a multimillionaire. So he's putting in like 6,300,
He's being
6,500
really
bucks a year.
cautious.
I know, like it's like it was a drop in the bucket. But the guy that sold it to him, I told him, I was like, listen, I know that guy. He's a schmuck. Okay. Like he doesn't know what he's doing. And he's like, yeah, but he sent me some referrals in my business. So I feel obligated to do a policy with him. So he's doing like $6,500 a year. 6 years later, he says, Chris, I've paid in like 37 grand or so, 38 grand into this policy, and I only have 18,000 in here. Like it's all going to cost. This isn't like what you were describing to me years ago. I said, no, I told you that. And so I showed him like, here's what it could look like. And I showed him like an example, paying in 50,000 a year, but then he has $40,000 available from day one versus zero, which is what he had for a couple years straight. I was like, no, like you put in that 50,000 a year for 2 years, instead of having zero, you would actually have roughly about, in the ballpark of like 85 to $90,000. He's like, well, that's way better. I should do a bigger policy. So he could actually debate between doing 50,000 to 100,000 a year. He did 50. I talked him down. I said, just try it out. You can always get another one later. And what's crazy is my commissions on that were double what that other agent made on that 6,500 policy. Because again, I just did what was best for the client. So it's funny because I get agents saying, oh, I can't afford to do that. I'm like, well, you can't afford not to. Like if you really have an abundance mentality around your business and you do the right thing for your clients, you'll realize that your clients will actually take care of you pretty well too. Not to mention, I got crap loads of referrals from that business that literally I was working like 10, 15 hours a week, but I was making over $1 million in commissions a year, even despite the fact that I lowered my commissions.
I could definitely see how this is a really attractive concept, which that easily brings in some of your language around the marketing and, just the words on your website, even. The big thing that stood out to me was, you're talking about insurance policies and things like that. But then it says, like, right there on the page, no kickbacks, no commissions. So could you explain a little bit, like, how does that work? How are you making money? I mean, obviously from your courses and things like that, where you're actually engaging and teaching. But if you're working with someone, setting up a policy or whatever, then how are you getting paid? How do you make money?
Yeah, so naturally on the insurance policies, we get paid commissions from the insurance companies, right? Although we do it a lot differently than how 99% plus of agents will do that kind of thing, where we minimize the commissions and cut the cost as low as possibly can go while keeping the life insurance still tax free. So we really cut our commissions on that down like 80%. And that's not our main strategy, but that's like the main product. I guess you could say if you're in talk about a product, a financial product, that's what we do offer, where we do design those policies. And we do it that way just because it gives people a better ROI on their money, specifically with using whole life insurance. I actually used to do everything from mutual funds to variable universal life to variable annuities to you name it. And then even in the early to mid 2000s, as they started to become popular, indexed annuities and index universal life, I used to do all that stuff. But after I really learned how to like do real estate investing and whatnot, I found a lot of guys that were wealthy or guys that even like were making millions in real estate kind of rejected all those kind of ideas, those different investment strategies, and they went more with using whole life, which I thought was like the worst thing you could possibly do. Because that's what I taught as a financial advisor back in the early 2000s, that whole life is the worst thing to buy. Never get it. It's a waste of money. It's a piece of crap. Don't do it. And then I'm seeing all these guys that have a lot more money and wealth than I do. And pretty much almost every financial advisor I knew did. And they're like, no, whole life is the best thing you can possibly get. And so I actually, eventually learned about it, and then over really the last 20 years, refined it to do it the way that I would do it for myself and my family as an investor and a business owner, and it's caught on. And I didn't intend it to be that way. I just got so pissed I couldn't find anybody, any other insurance guys or financial advisors to do it for me to send my clients to. They wouldn't do it consistently the way that I would want it done. So we finally just brought it in house and just decided to do it ourselves. And that's what we've done really that part of the business ourselves internally since 2017 versus referring it out. The other side of the business, we do more of a consulting type of program where we charge the client a one-time fee with a little bit of retainer on the back end. Not so much like a financial advisor fee, but more just consulting fee to say, let's help you strategize and do things that are outside of Wall Street, more Main Street investing, things that might be investing in business, real estate, oil and gas, things of that nature, more alternative investments, and just kind of connecting them to those kind of deals, like what's available out there. But on that end, I don't make any back end commissions for anybody they might get connected to that we may know. That's something that's kind of rare out there because there are like mastermind groups and stuff that will say, "Hey, we've got our whole network you can use." But what the clients often don't know, or those people, those mastermind members don't know, is that on the back end, these people are being paid, and the only reason that those investments are in that group is because they promise them a nice chunk of money. And so it's not really pure advice. And so for me to kind of feel for myself, make sure I'm not even subconsciously being swayed, we just say, no one pay us. We even had one guy that did hard money real estate lending, that said, hey, we'll pay you 1% back for every dollar that somebody invests. And I said, yeah, could you pay that 1% back to my client instead and pay them more? He said, well, nobody's ever asked me that before. I was like, just do that. One, because liability reasons, you don't want to get caught if anything goes wrong. But two, I was like, again, I want to make sure it's pure. So I'm like, yeah, if you can pay back to the client, that'd be great. He's like, well, yeah, that would make the returns between 12 and 14% a year. That's incredible. I'm like, it would be. And guess what? More of my clients might actually want to listen to you, so that's a good thing. So that's kind of like what we do there. So that's why we only charge the client. We work for them versus working for other people because they pay us.
I really like the uh, transparency and what I really think is just an alignment with your values there.
Isn't that the way it should be?
Exactly. Exactly. So that goes into like the whole, business philosophy of like taking care of people correctly, even though it may look like you're going to make less or your commissions are lower, they're not, whatever it is. But serving their needs now and being really transparent about it. And then them not only being really happy with what you did, potentially, buying more, re upping, whatever, and referring you business because then they're so happy. And then that's the piece that really ends up blowing up your business, like what we all hope and wish for. So I love that you took that risk and that you were able to just see almost immediate gratification of like, I did the right thing and it matters and I'm getting paid back for it. With all that you just said, let's switch gears just slightly and talk about your content that you create. I love the concept of money ripples. It definitely gives you that visual of like the water rippling and like the circles expanding. The messaging, the naming, all of that is right on target. So, if you'll talk to me a little bit about what made you decide to start a podcast, and was that the initial intention, or did you start blogging first, or like what was your foray into creating content about this topic?
It's interesting because this is not my first podcast, even though I've done the Money Ripples podcast for over 11 years now. So I'm one of the OGs in the space, I guess you could say. But what gave me the bug for the podcast was in 2007, when I started to work with them, that partner, Garrett Gunnarsson, he actually did AM talk radio. And then by 2008, he's like, I'm just kind of busy. He was writing his book, Killing Sacred Cows and everything, and trying to launch it. So he's like, how about you fill in? How about you do it? So I would go literally on AM talk radio. I stopped taking callers after a while because they were cuckoo. But I mean, the board, like I'd have to watch it because like every 7-minute segments, you have to like go right to commercial breaks. You had to like, give them little snippets, right? You like right when you get warmed up, you're like, and we're going to commercial, and have to fade out and fade in the music and all that stuff. And then of course we eventually got rid of the radio show because it was expensive to keep it going because you have to pay to be on the radio. One of my friends said, "Hey, listen, there's this new thing. This is end of 2008. He's like, there's this new thing called podcasts. I'm like, what are those? He's like, it's like online radio. I'm like, well, that's awesome. And so my original intention for doing it was two reasons. One, any frequently asked questions or should be asked questions from clients, it's so much nicer to say, here's what the question I get asked all the time, record it. And if they ask the question, say, listen to this first, and then come back and ask for clarifying questions. So it frees up my time. Two, I also had a bunch of young kids. I actually have of my own children. I have 6 children between the ages of 9 and 21. That does not include the 2 bonus children I have with my wife from her previous marriage, right? So we got 8 between the two of us. And when my kids were young, I thought, man, all these things I've learned about money, even though I was going broke, but still I learned a lot of things. I'm like, I need them to know this. So I was recording a lot of that stuff just in case I died young. It was something I could pass on to my kids too. So that first podcast was ironically called "Fire Your Financial Advisor." I did that for 4 years. I tell them like, fire your financial advisor. Here's a better alternative, which you could do with us instead, right? Which is using our services. And then 2012 was when I launched Money Ripples. I was starting a new company, so I just stopped doing the podcast. But in 2014, I went on a pretty popular show called Entrepreneurs on Fire by John Lee Dumas. We actually co-wrote a book together with him and Tim Ferriss, which was kind of cool. So because we did that, I said, hey, I would love to be on your podcast. Got on, loved it. Our numbers boomed on our website. And I remember talking to a friend at lunch. I said, man, I had so much fun doing that. I miss it. He's like, why don't you do it again? This was on a Friday, right? Friday afternoon. He's like, well, why don't you just do your own podcast? I said, maybe I should do another one. So the next Tuesday, I aired my first podcast. Wasn't pretty. It was recorded on like over the phone. Like I literally had my phone recording it because it was through Blog Talk Radio. I was doing it, and I didn't know you could just pre-record and upload it. So I was doing it on my phone. It sounded horrible. Like it was horrible sound quality, but I got it out. I launched it. Or as some people say, you shipped it, right? So I shipped it, got it out. And then I just kept doing it, kept revising it, making it better and better. Eventually about 2015, about a year or so later, I realized, wait a minute, this could actually be a great tool to get more clients because I was just doing it to teach, right? And so eventually I started using it more as a marketing, started going on other people's podcasts, stopped doing as much live speaking and traveling all over the country and stuff. And what happened is my business doubled, but my profits octupled, by doing that. I just went all in on podcasting. And really, even to this day, 80 to 90% of our business comes from podcast or YouTube. Like it's really like the big part of what drives our business even today. And again, so easy because people become nurtured because they get to know you better and they're almost sold on you even before they talk to you in the first place. So you don't have to really do a sales job with people. You just have to see what they want and see if you can help them get it. And it's much better place to come from authority standpoint because you do something like that.
So you didn't even start it, creating content or a podcast because you knew that it would create trust or give you authority in the space or grow your client like you started it because you were like, that was cool and I want to teach and record just in case, A, if I pass away, but B, people can learn. And so I like that really like genuine initial reasoning. I have a question about when you say 80-90% of your people come from your show, from listening to your show and then turn into clients. But then also layer that with, like you said, you are one of the OGs in the space. So do you think that longevity of being consistent and creating content and having the show for 11 years is is kind of what leads to those big 80-90% numbers that all these new podcasters are hoping for? Or like what do you think is like the trick there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, sometimes people reach out pretty quickly if they hear me on another show, and then that's one thing I learned after the second time I was on Entrepreneurs on Fire is I, instead of driving my website, I drove my podcast and then found out that was a great nurturing tool, right? I mean, we hear this all the time. People are like, hey, I've been following you for years. I finally decided to reach out. And that's the thing. It's like you're right. The longevity is everything. And I remember even in 2015, being a year or so in, I actually had a really rough day one day. I think it was in September. Um, I was just thinking like, man, if I just quit this podcast, would anybody even notice? Like, would it just be like, am I just talking to myself? Because especially when you're doing this, and I wasn't using camera at the time. I started audio only, but still, I felt like I was just talking to myself. And so that same morning, I'm like, maybe I should just shut it down. This is depressing me. And then I go to this conference, this like conference for like people that do essential oils. I had some friends and clients there. And so I was like, okay, I'll go to your conference and see what it's like. 18,000 people were there. So massive. And I go out in the hallway and people start coming out for break times or whatever. And I see this guy across the hall staring at me. And it kind of made me uncomfortable, right? I'm kind of an introvert anyways, but seeing him stare at me, like keep looking at me, I'm like, who is this guy? I don't know him. Why does he keep looking at me? And then finally he decides to walk over. He's like, are you Chris Miles? Yeah. He's like, oh my gosh, my wife and I love you. We actually listen to your podcast. Like, we love it. It's so awesome. And by the way, my podcast was maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks at that time. And he's like, yeah, we listen to your podcast all the time. It's so good. I'm like, really? That's interesting to hear. Like, how'd you even hear about it? Oh, well, our team leader is one of your clients. I'm like, oh, okay, Stacy, got it. So I made the connection. He's like, yeah, let me go get my wife. And so he gets his wife, but then he brings there's like probably like another 6 people there too. He brings them over. They're like, oh, we all listen to your podcast too. We love it. And I was like, that's really cool to hear because I was literally thinking about shutting it down today. They're like, no, don't shut it down. Like, just because we're not, asking you or we don't feel like we're ready for you yet, doesn't mean that you're not doing good stuff. Like, please just keep doing it. Don't give up on us. And so I didn't. I kept going, now 10 years later after that event, and that's what's kind of cool is that longevity really does earn trust. Definitely helps a lot of times when there's other podcasters like yourself, like, okay, I don't have to describe to you what we need to do before the show. You've done this like on your own show almost 1,000 times. You got this, right? Like it makes it nice. It makes it very easy, and it makes it also helpful for me as a guest to try to figure out what to make better for the episode for other people too.
So thank you for sharing that story because I think so many people hit that moment where they're thinking like, my numbers aren't growing or this isn't working or I'm talking to myself. The video these days is interesting because yes, we can see each other. So it does feel slightly differently than recording just audio. But it also adds a layer of complexity that's really scary to some people. Some people aren't comfortable in video. So then they're like, oh my gosh, I can't do a podcast because now if you do a podcast, you have to do video. So there's like, there's all
You
these
don't have to, but it
differing,
helps.
yeah,
Yeah.
you definitely don't have to. But yes, I think we all hit those moments at some point in our business, in our content, whatever it is that we're doing. So aside from the longevity, because none of us can go back in time, what do you think that you've done that has really made a difference for either your listener numbers, your email list, your client list? Like, what has been the podcasting trick or like whatever? Like, what has worked?
It doesn't hurt to have good guests on, obviously. People like that. I think the biggest thing is know who you're talking to. Like, know who your target audience is. Because when, like, up to that point, I mean, I wasn't really getting good clients at that time, anyways, from it, because I was kind of just talking to everybody. And if you're doing a podcast, you should not be just talking to everybody. Because if you talk to everybody, you're talking to nobody. And if you've done marketing long enough, you already get this, right? What changed for me and actually caused my business to explode while doing a lot less when I went down to like 5 or 10 hours a week was I was thinking of that Pareto principle, the 80-20 principle, where usually 80% of your money comes from 20% of your clients. I decided to do the Pareto's principle on the Pareto's principle. I call it Pareto the crap out of the Pareto's principle, right? Which is what's the top 20 of the top 20%, which is the top 4% that makes 96%. And so I went to like, who's my favorite one or two clients? And I would image them. Even before I hit record on my podcast, I would think of them. I would picture them. I would talk to them, not by name, but I'm talking to that kind of person, right? Not just their age, demographics, all that kind of stuff, male, female. I mean, that helps. But I was thinking about psychographics too. Like, what are they thinking about? What are the questions they're asking? What do they really want? And if you're not sure, ask them what they want, right? Or you get commonly asked questions. I mean, just like I started out doing, right? I mean, those commonly asked questions are great content to be able to put out and say, here's why, or here's what this is, or here's how this works, right? When I started focusing on the clients I wanted versus the ones I didn't want, but the ones I really wanted, they would just come out of the woodworks. They would just keep showing up and showing up. And so that's very important is know who you're talking to, know your avatar, know that demographic, know the person, what they're asking about, what they're doing, what their situation is. Are you focused? Like in my experience, the thing that really gains a lot of trust for people is because they're like, you were like the wizard behind the curtain. You were the financial advisor. You were there on the back scenes. You're the one that stepped out from the curtain and said, hey, I was the wizard. I'm nothing special, but here's what worked, right? For that unique story, those unique experiences, no one can take that away, I think that's what's really important is that you got to put yourself into it, then use tools like AI to help you even more. I'll tell you that's my secret lately. The last year is I would call it AI plus critical thinking. Like, don't just use AI because AI by itself sucks. But what I learned from a really good marketer just in the last really 3 months, that's all it's been, is he's like, hey, let's figure out who your avatar is. And so he put it in, we're like putting in the demographics, the question they're asking. And then he would ask, okay, what's the burning question at 3 a.m. that would wake them up? What are they thinking about? And we would keep refining it till we got to that person. What's the question they have? Do they have kids or not? Do they have families? Like we just got down to a point where we had a very specific person that says, here's what they're thinking about. Here's the things that they worry about. Here are their desires and dreams, to the point where I was like, that's my client. He's like, great. Now we have a starting point. Now we start messaging. Now we create the offer. Now we create the message on the website. Now we create the message and stuff. And I have that all uploaded in my AI now, so that when I go to do podcast episodes, I'll say, keep in mind my target audience, and you got to ask the right questions. I'm like, for this, like, here's the topic of the show. What would be what would be a great title that would just hook these people, that it's like scroll stopping for them, like they would have to watch it. What is it that, and if they come in with, whatever suggestion there, I was like, raise the stakes, like pretend like my business is going to end in 7 days. And I got to have them watch this episode. What would it be? And then AI steps up this game even more, right? And I'll even throw in like Alex Hormozy, like, Alex Hormozy stuff for impact and clarity and all this stuff. Put that in too, and make sure it's SEO friendly and AI SEO friendly, so they'll find on the searches. And then boom, then we finally find a nice title. They're like, hey, do you want a hook for that? Yes, give me a hook. And I can use that hook too for the show, right? And here's what's so cool is that now AI actually recommends us. Like they start recommending money ripples, right? Like even for like generational wealth. That's not a topic we talk a lot about, but we were literally listed as one of the companies, and people are now coming in from doing AI chat GPT searches. They're now finding money ripples beyond just our podcast. And so that's the thing is like you can really use technology nowadays to make amazing things. And yes, I already hear it coming out from you guys as financial advisors, especially if you're securities licensed. You're like, yeah, but I can't do that. I have to clear everything through compliance. That's true. But could you make it about something other than investing? Could you be talking about personal development stuff or success trips or habits or whatever it might be? And then that just leads more trust and garners that trust to help people come. So then you don't have to worry about freaking compliance. You can say, hey, this is not even money related. I might mention that I do it. Maybe I'll advertise my company, but that's it.
I love that. So you basically just talked us through high level how to kind of program ChatGPT for ourselves for our business. And that's the thing that I find that when people say, "Oh, like it sounds so AI," or "I can't use it," or "I don't get it," or um, everything it spits out is like so misaligned or whatever. That's the piece that they're missing is taking the time to go in and I forget what it's called, but it's like somewhere in settings where you can even tell it like never use these certain words, remember I am this. And
And upload, like you get transcriptions of things you have done or recordings or any writings you've done, load it in there and say, use my words, like sound like me. And that's where it gets scary,
yeah.
right? Then you're like, wow, like AI could actually try to be me. Now, granted, I'm not very well polished, which is like the one thing that people say, oh, we know Chris not AI because he could be way more polished if he were, so he's got to be real, but it's true. You can
Right.
definitely use that. I mean, yeah. So upload all your content, and that's the thing we did too. We like threw in all of our content, like uploaded some of the like webinars that I would do and things like that, and throw in the transcription. Say, great, use that as reference, or use this website as reference. That's my website. Use that as reference now for here forward, and say, yeah, remember this, and they'll say, good, got it, locked in.
I do find that that is something people are totally missing in the whole AI space. They're either signing up for and paying for and using tools and then thinking they can copy and paste and it is bad. Let's just be honest. Or they have tried and gotten frustrated and it's been a turnoff for them. And no offense to continuing to use a copywriter or paying for various services, those are important too, because those people can often come up with really creative terms and really wonderful connective language for your audience. But, if you need something today, that's where programming AI to where you can use it on a whim is really, really helpful. So, okay, let's lean on that just a little bit. How else are you using AI in your business, in your podcast? Aside from ChatGPT, are there any other tools that you're using? What are you loving right now?
I mean, chat definitely is amazing. I know Claude's better for writing. So if you're trying to do writing, Claude.ai is better. And just so you know, guys, like I was resistant to AI up until spring of 2025. So like months ago, like I was refusing to use it, and now I am. Right. By the way, create fun content is there's even like an AI app for Dave Ramsey. So if you ever like people always ask me like, I wish you go toe to toe with Dave Ramsey. I'm like, let's be honest. Dave Ramsey has the little call end button. He always gets the last word. He will always win. He'll make sure of it. There's never a time when he doesn't win. That's stupid for me to go on his turf. But there is an AI Dave Ramsey that I can actually talk. And I even went through and said, hey, wait, so Dave, you're saying you've done this with your investing. So shouldn't we do that too? He's like, yeah, good point. I'm like, oh, he would never admit that on his show, but his AI version did. Right. So you can do all kinds of fun stuff that way, of course. Here's other tools I use with AI. There's like napkin.ai, like, napkin, yeah, whatever. That one's great if you're trying to create like maybe visuals, like diagrams. If you're trying to create like this, pyramid type diagram or whatever it might be, or flow type stuff. If you're trying to create diagrams to show clients, because I'll tell you, in our space, one of the hardest things is trying to show people, like create visuals of concepts that you do, especially around investing in money. It can be very overwhelming for people. Even if it's simple, they'll have mind blocks about that. It's got to be hard. So a lot of times using those visuals might be a great way to do it. So napkin.ai could be another great one you could use too.
Thank you. That's not one I've tried. So now I'm going to go try it.
Awesome.
Talk to us just a little bit about what I call the conversion loop. And that is how you bring people in through your podcast, what their next steps are through the process until they actually become a client. Do they join your email list? Do they sign up for a free something or another? What's that look like for your business?
Yeah, I mean, there's different things you use as lead magnets. I mean, with our infinite banking part of the page, we actually have already like a master class there, so they can watch the master class, which again saves us time. In fact, we require them to watch the master class before they come talk to us. So then they're already ready to say, okay, cool, I think I know what I want. It needs to look like this. And literally within a half hour or so, we can be like, here's your plan. You like it? Cool. Let's get it started. Right. Like it's makes it much, much easier. That's one of the things we do is like we'll post like certain videos. I do have a newsletter that people can sign up for, and some people will actually opt into that, even though I'm always shocked when people do personally. We are releasing a new book, like an actual real book called Work Optional Blueprint, that's been released here in September. That one is definitely now becoming more the lead magnet. We can even run ads even on social media and stuff with that one. And actually, we're doing a free plus shipping type of promotion. So people pay nothing for the book, but they just pay like the $9.99 for shipping. And crazy enough, it actually worked out. The cost break even. So for our cost per lead, it's like zero. But now we're getting these leads that obviously. Here's the one thing I've learned from marketing is that for every $1,000 somebody wants to spend with you, they need about 1 hour of your content to consume. So if you're selling something for $1,000, they watch 1 hour of your content, they'd probably be ready to pay $1,000. But say that it's going to be $25,000, that means they need 25 hours of your content. So it could be a podcast, it could be YouTube videos or whatever it might be. It could be some kind of free course or even a paid course you give them that kind of leads them through the funnel, right? I do have those too. But I'll tell you, for myself personally, in our funnel, we have an upside down funnel where more people hire us for the one-on-one, the higher priced, high ticket stuff than they will for the lower priced products. Because I really believe that marketing is going to a place where people are tired of Zoom calls, like at least just where it's only Zoom calls, right? Because we do Zoom calls, of course. But they don't want just Zoom. They don't want to just have some online course. They want that customized like feel, like you know who I am. This is not just like automation or AI telling me what to do. I need some kind of other intelligence that's helping me out here. So that's the kind of stuff that people are really looking for. We actually have what's called a passive income calculator on our website. I was getting tired of calculating, like, here's the results I can create in the next 12 months. So I finally just put into a calculator to let that do all the work, spits out the number. And the cool thing is it pre-qualifies those people for us. If they don't have quite a high enough number to work with us on the high end side, we can just say, you know what? Here's a program we'd recommend. Like this would be your next step. But if they are qualified, we can say, wow, like look at that, like $80,000 you can create in passive income the next year. We need to talk. Like we need to talk to see how we can actually help you make that happen. Literally, like in the last 24 hours, I saw a couple people come with a couple $100,000 in the next 12 months they could create in passive income. That's ongoing income year after year. I mean, that's for some people, that's a dream in the financial advisor space. But there's literally people like that we find all the time that we would never know otherwise. But we say, hey, try the calculator. And by the way, yes, I'll sometimes even say on my podcast, try our calculator, drive them to the website, right? So that's the thing. That's a key thing too. If you ever do webinars, podcasts, or anything, give them a call to action, refer them to the website or wherever they can go to follow you so that they, again, they're engaged beyond just the podcasts.
Yeah, I do find that a lot of times when I'm reviewing someone's show, the content might be great. They might be an interesting person. They have a great business. They've got all the things. But nowhere are they actually saying, here's how you can work with me. Here's your next step. Here's this free calculator. Like, something obvious and tangible. And so a lot of times when we're, reworking a strategy for a show, one of the big things we're adding is just a simple call to action. And we might be talking through and adjusting where it lands in the show, or whether it's, being inserted as a commercial, or whether it's in the intro or the outro or both, or what. There's so many things you could do with it. But if you don't have one at all, these people literally do not know how to take the next step or how to pay you. And so that's not a situation you want to be in. And you said, okay, you were doing that 10 years ago. So what was the hump that you had to get over? Like, were you afraid to sell? Did you feel salesy or like weird about asking for them to try something or join a newsletter or download a freebie? What was the switch?
Yeah, I wasn't really scared. It just didn't cross my mind because the whole reason I did the podcast, and even when I didn't need to have my business anymore, by the second time, 2016, I had enough, passive income. I mean, even now I have 50,000 a month coming in. I don't need my business, right? But that podcast is a labor of love for me. And that's what it was. I was just given content. And I just knew dollars follows value, right? The more value you provide and service you provide for people and help them solve problems, the more money you make anyways. So I wasn't really hurting. I didn't need to. But then it was actually somebody had pointed out, they're like, I've listened to some of your episodes. Not once have you mentioned how people can work with you. Shouldn't you do that at some point? Shouldn't you actually mention that instead of just, I mean, you're giving great content, but no one knows what they are. In fact, I had random people reaching out saying, hey, I don't know what it is you're selling, but I want to buy it. What do you do? Right? Like if that gave you a clue, it's like, oh, I wasn't doing a good enough job communicating what I actually do for people. And so now I take more of an approach, like at least every, I would say 4 or 5 episodes, I might say, hey, here's what I actually do. Here's what we do for clients. Let me give you an example to try to like illustrate what it is we actually do. And I'll tell you, you can tell them what you do, but it's so much more helpful if you can give them a story of how you did it, right? Because when they can relate, say, oh, that client's like me, especially when it's your ideal target audience, your ideal client, great. Like use those stories and say, here's what it is. Because so many times people say, that was me, especially when you get into beyond just, here's what we did, X, Y, Z, left brain logical, right? If you're like, no, like this is what this person felt, here's what they wanted, but here are their fears, here's the skepticism they had, or here's what they had to overcome, and this kind of thing. And then you go into that kind of detail with them and then say, but here's what they were able to do. Here's how they were able to bridge that gap, right? And cross over, here's the solution. That's when people say, I want that. I need to reach out. I need to do it. And so that's really the kind of the secret code. I mean, very summed up, but it's kind of the secret way of really getting people to not just follow you, but actually become clients of yours.
So I can only imagine that in your upcoming book, you have lots of stories and like the combination of teaching and guidance that we're all looking for. Being in the podcasting space so long, and you've mentioned your passive income, and then how you're still just choosing to continue to do this because you can still help people. So now you wrote a book. Like, what is it that's driving you to continue to do the next thing and the next bigger thing, even though you don't have to?
I will say this about the book. It was an interesting project, took a little over a year, which apparently is fast. We thought it took us forever. We were trying to release it last September of 2024. We're trying to get it launched in 2 months. Didn't happen. I had a friend who was using AI, was taking a lot of my, podcasts, key podcasts plus webinars, and then combining it together. It was good. It was about 100 pages, which is awesome because I would never sit down and write 100 pages. But I realized there was something missing. It was that emotional piece. And so then I brought in another writer to help me out, interview me, talk, ask me questions like, how'd you get over this? Like, you're over a million in debt. What was happening at that time? Like, how bad was it? Like really going into that story. Add another 50 pages. And then I hired somebody else to help me organize it and rearrange a few of the chapters, even though the writer did a good job, rearrange it, give a better flow to it. Even when we had the last editor going through it, she's like, honestly, this is pretty good. I don't have to change much. This is great. And so um, that was hard, but AI was a huge piece of that too, even though I wasn't using it specifically. Um, but the whole reason I do all of that is that ripple effect, right? Money ripples. The whole reason I named it that was when I was working with Garrett Gunderson before, I could just feel that something was ending. I just had that impression. And so I was creating my own brand or trying to couldn't find a website. And finally, I was out for a run one morning, and because like all my ideas, they tend to happen when I'm on a run. Um, but I was trying to think of what was my vision, and I thought about one particular client. They were a chiropractor out of South Dakota, and sorry, Dakota. There we go. Got to say it right. But I was thinking about them. Like we actually improved their cash flow, not even passive income, not even investing, just the cash flow side with tax savings, debt restructuring, and things like that. $6,000 a month. And it allowed him to like finally stop working 5 or 6 days a week. And then he worked more like 4.5 days. And so he got his weekends back because up to that point, he was just so tired. He couldn't even like really do much. He still wanted to be with his family. He was still a good father, but you could tell there's not much left in the tank. But after he did that, like that 6,000 a month, all of a sudden he's like, man, like now I can take an extra day off work. I can take off Fridays. I can actually do that. And the first $6,000 I freed up, they bought a four-wheeler. And now Dave Ramsey would have said, "Oh, that's horrible," like, "Yeah, you're stupid. That was an idiot." But I knew why, and the wife said, "Like Chris, you got to understand. I know people would judge us for buying that four wheeler, but you don't understand. He gave himself permission to take the weekends off, and every single weekend he's on that four wheeler with my kids. My kids got their father back, and I got my husband back.
Yeah. And they're out there having
And I thought
fun,
about
doing something
that ripple effect,
exhilarating.
right? Yeah, I mean, think about it. That creates a whole new legacy for the kids to follow. It also creates more time freedom for him so he can stop focusing on just himself and focus on the community, which blesses the community, the country, and ultimately across the world. And that's when the name Money Ripples came to my mind. It was that. And I was like, crap, I got to run home, see if anybody has that name. Found it on
Don't
GoDaddy for
forget it.
$7.95. I was like, I got it. Yeah. It's like, yes, it's mine. And of course, the next month, Garrett and I parted ways. So I had the website already taken. I was like, I better launch it fast. I had to start from scratch with a non-compete as well. So it was rough, but I was able to do that. And that's really what drives me every day. It's just that ripple effect is that I believe that God's put me on this planet for a reason. I know that I've got these experiences and these abilities, and I've got the resources to be able to have a bigger megaphone. I got to create that. And so everything I'm doing, even the book, even though I cursed it for years, I did it because people were begging. They wanted something in writing versus just the podcast. And so that's what I did. And so it's a huge labor of love. And the sad thing is I got asked when's my next book. I'm like, no, don't ask me. I'm just birthing this baby. Do not ask me when I'm having my next baby. It hurts too dang much. So stop asking. But who knows? Maybe I'll do another one.
No, that's inspiring. It gives us a layer of understanding and again, a story to be able to identify with. Like I come up with my best ideas out for a run as well. I totally get that thing of like running home and oh my God, like, can I do this thing? Like it came to me. I'm inspired and like in the moment. And then I loved how
Power,
you
right?
had
I
that.
call it the shower of power
Yes.
because you get all the ideas in the shower, like, where I got to write that down.
Yes. Well, so they make suction cup like whiteboards that
Yeah.
you can tack up in the shower so you can like write some stuff so you don't forget it.
Because I'm not the only one, right?
No, you're not the only one. Um,
Yep.
but but again, like I just love that. Well, for one, you had the premonition that something was ending and you weren't necessarily clear on what it was, but then this idea came to, and just like the pieces fall into place. And then the other thing there that I think translates across all spaces of life is that your action creates other actions, right? Like if you hadn't been out for a run, literally physically doing an action, thinking about what am I going to do next, like, thinking about this person that you've helped, and then that inspiration came. So if at any point someone feels stuck or frustrated or like kind of in a lower place, take action, like physical action in your life, and it will create inspiration in other areas. So tell us where to find your book, where to find and follow you, and of course, where to listen to your show.
So the book is called Work Optional Blueprint. You can find it on Amazon or wherever you buy books. Audible even, right? You can even do that too because I'm recording the Audible version as well. And then our website, moneyripples.com, everything's branded Money Ripples, at Money Ripples, or Money Ripples with Chris Miles, like our YouTube channel, which includes our Money Ripples podcast.
Thank you so much for your stories, your wisdom, and all your podcasting knowledge.